What I am about to tell you is not a trading strategy. It is not a setup. It is not a pattern you can draw on a chart. What I am about to tell you is the story of a man who understood the market better than almost any human being who has ever lived. A man who made $100 million in a single year, and then lost it all, and then made it back, and then lost it all again. He did this 4 times. The same man, the same market, the same extraordinary mind. 4 times he reached the very top. 4 times he fell back to nothing. His name was Jesse Livermore. And if you think his story is about money, you have already missed the most important lesson he ever left behind. Jesse Livermore was born in 1877 in a small farming town in Massachusetts. His family had nothing. When Jesse was 13 years old, his father pulled him out of school to work on the farm. But Jesse had already decided something that nobody around him could see yet. He had already decided that his life was going to be different. So he did what people with no options and everything to prove sometimes do. He ran. He left home with $5 in his pocket and walked into a brokerage office in Boston, looking for any kind of work they would give him. They gave him a job posting stock prices on a chalkboard. He was 14 years old, standing in front of numbers all day, and most people in that room saw a young boy doing a simple job. Jesse saw something else entirely. He did not just write the numbers. He watched them. He studied the way they moved, the way a price would sit still for a long time and then suddenly jump, the way certain stocks behaved before something big happened. He started keeping a small notebook, not to record what the prices were, but to record how they behaved. The pauses, the hesitations, the little signals that most people walked past without noticing. By the time Jesse was 15 years old, he had turned his $5 into over $1,000 trading on the side. This was not luck. This was a mind that had found the one thing in the world it was built to do. The other traders in Boston gave him a nickname. They called him the Boy Plunger. Because when Jesse was certain about something, he did not hesitate. He did not take a small position to test the waters. He went all in. And in those early years, that certainty made him rich over and over again. He moved to New York. He built a reputation. He was making more money than men 3 times his age. And everything about that early success told him one thing: trust yourself. Trust what you see. Trust that voice inside you that reads the market before the market shows its hand. That voice had never been wrong. That voice was everything. But then something happened that would quietly define the next 4 decades of his life. And the painful part is that it did not feel dangerous at the time. It felt completely reasonable. A friend came to him with a tip, a stock that was certain to go up. Jesse looked at it. His own reading of the situation said the timing was wrong. Something felt off. But his friend was confident. The information seemed solid. And Jesse, for the first time in his trading life, decided to go against what he truly believed and follow someone else's opinion instead. He lost. Badly. And here is what most people do in that moment. They blame the friend. They blame the tip. They call it bad luck and move on. Jesse went back to his analysis. He studied harder. He recovered the money. But the deeper lesson, the real lesson about what had gone wrong inside him, that lesson had not been fully absorbed yet. He understood the mistake with his mind. He had not yet felt it at the level where real change happens. And so the market, the way it always does with lessons that have not been truly learned, decided to teach him again. More painfully. More expensively. This is what markets do. They are not cruel. They are not personal. But they are relentless teachers. They do not accept intellectual understanding as payment. They require behavioral change. And until you change the behavior, they will keep presenting you with the same test, in larger and larger amounts, until either you learn or you are finished. Now let me tell you about the moment Jesse Livermore became a legend. Not just among traders. In history. The year was 1929. The American stock market had been climbing for years. The entire country was intoxicated. Ordinary people were taking out loans to buy stocks. Taxi drivers were giving tips on which companies to buy. Newspapers were writing about endless prosperity. There was a feeling in the air that the old rules no longer applied, that a new era had arrived. Those markets only went up. Jesse Livermore watched all of this, and what he felt, deep in that part of his mind that could read the market better than any other human being alive, what he felt was not excitement. What he felt was dread. He began quietly building a short position. While the rest of America was buying with both hands, Jesse was placing a massive bet that everything was about to collapse. His own advisors warned him he was wrong. His friends told him he had lost his judgment. The newspapers spoke of nothing but prosperity and growth. Every signal from the world around him said he was making a catastrophic mistake. Jesse held his position. He sat with the discomfort of being the only one who believed what he believed. He sat with the weight of going against the entire mood of a nation. And he did not move. On October 24th, 1929, the market broke. What followed was the greatest stock market crash in American history. Fortunes disappeared overnight. Banks collapsed. The country entered a decade of economic suffering that touched every single person alive. And Jesse Livermore, the man who had stood alone against the crowd, made $100 million. $100 million in 1929. That is the equivalent of well over $1 billion in today's money. He was, at that moment, arguably the greatest trader who had ever lived. And the entire financial world wanted to know what he would do next. What happened next is the part of Jesse Livermore's story that almost nobody talks about. And it is the part that matters most. Not just for understanding him, for understanding yourself. Because what destroyed Jesse Livermore after the greatest trade of his life was not a market he could not read. It was not bad luck. It was not some external force he could not have predicted. What destroyed him was something that lives inside every single person who has ever sat in front of a trading screen and felt the rush of being right. 08:32. Success made him feel invincible. That is the only way to say it. After making $100 million by going against the entire world and being proven correct, something shifted inside Jesse. The rules he had built over decades, the careful, painful, hard-won rules about following his own instincts, about waiting for the right moment, about never letting emotion override analysis. Those rules started to feel like they were for a lesser version of himself, a version that still needed guardrails. He had proven that he was beyond that now, or at least, that is what the voice of his success was telling him. 09:18. He started trading larger than his own system ever allowed. He started listening to other people again. Because when you are the most famous trader in the world, everyone wants to give you information. And some part of the ego enjoys being the man at the center of it all. He started holding losing positions longer than he should have, because a man who had just made $100 million could not psychologically tolerate the idea of being wrong on something. The ego protection instinct looked exactly like patience. It felt exactly like confidence. But it was neither. It was the beginning of the end. 10:05. Think about what had actually happened here. The same three patterns that had cost him money early in his career came back. First, listening to other people over his own analysis. Every single time Jesse Livermore went against his own reading of the market and followed someone else's opinion, he lost. Not sometimes, every time. And yet, he kept returning to this pattern because the psychological need to be connected, to be part of something, to feel that the information flowing to you from trusted people has value. That need is older and deeper than any trading rule ever written. Second, the inability to fully accept being wrong. Jesse hated being wrong. Not in the way that produces careful analysis and discipline. In the way that produces hope. The terrible, expensive kind of hope that makes a trader sit in a losing position far too long, waiting for the market to come back and prove him correct. His ego needed to be right more than his account needed to cut the loss. And the market never cooperates with ego. It never has. It never will. Third, overconfidence after success. Every major breakdown in Jesse Livermore's career followed a major success. The wins made him feel that he had finally solved the puzzle, that he was now operating at a level where the ordinary rules did not apply. But the rules always apply. That is what makes them rules. The market does not give anyone a permanent exemption. Not for intelligence, not for experience, not even for a track record as extraordinary as Jesse Livermore's. Now I want to tell you something that will stay with you long after this video ends. Jesse Livermore wrote down his own rules. He understood, completely and precisely, exactly what he needed to do to be consistently successful. He wrote about cutting losses quickly without hesitation. He wrote about never adding to a losing position. He wrote about waiting for the market to confirm his analysis before committing fully. He wrote about the danger of tips and outside information. He wrote about the psychological traps that quietly destroy traders from the inside. The hope, the fear, the impatience, the ego. He understood all of it. He could teach it better than almost any person alive. And yet he could not consistently do it himself. Read that again slowly. He knew exactly what to do. He could not consistently do it. This is not a story about Jesse Livermore anymore. This is a story about you. This is a story about every trader who has ever sat down, made a plan, looked at a setup, and then watched themselves do the exact thing they had promised they would not do. Because knowledge and behavior are not the same thing. Understanding a rule is one skill. Following that rule at the exact moment when your emotions are screaming at you to break it is a completely different skill. And the market does not reward knowledge. The market rewards the consistent execution of correct behavior under conditions of fear and uncertainty. That is a psychological skill, not an analytical one. Jesse Livermore made and lost enormous fortunes 4 separate times over the course of his life, and each time the pattern was the same. He rose. He stopped following his own rules. He fell. Not because the market changed, not because his ability disappeared, because the emotional triggers that had never been fully addressed came back. Every time, at different times, in different ways, under different circumstances, but always the same triggers, always the same patterns. The market does not need new ways to test you. It only ever needs the one way that already works. On November 28, 1940, Jesse Livermore walked into a restaurant in New York and left behind a note. The note said that his life had been a failure. He was 63 years old. He had made and lost more money than most people could imagine in 10 lifetimes. He had been the most feared trader on Wall Street. He had made the single greatest trade in American financial history. And at the end of all of it, what he felt was failure. I am not telling you this to make you feel sad. I want you to feel something else entirely when you hear this. I want you to feel the weight of what that moment reveals. Jesse Livermore's tragedy was not financial. His tragedy was that he spent his entire life fighting the market when the real battle was always somewhere else. The market was never his enemy. It never is anyone's enemy. The market is neutral. It does not know your name. It does not know your history. It does not care about your wins or your losses. The market just moves. And in that movement, your emotional reactions determine everything. Jesse's enemy was inside him the whole time. The patterns that made him listen to others when he should have trusted himself. The pattern that made him hold on when he should have let go. The pattern that made success feel like permission to stop being disciplined. Those patterns were always the fight, and he never fully won it. But here is what Jesse Livermore did leave behind for every trader who comes after him. He left a map. Not a map of the market, a map of the psychological battlefield that every single trader must cross if they want to last. He showed us where the traps are, not by writing about them in theory, but by walking into every single one of them personally and showing us exactly what happens. He showed us that the mind that makes you successful is not automatically the mind that keeps you successful. He showed us that rules without the emotional discipline to follow them are just words. He showed us that the most dangerous moment in any trader's journey is not after a loss. It is after a win. Because a loss makes you careful. A win makes you believe you no longer need to be. And he showed us the one lesson that sits above all the others. The difference between a great trader and a consistently great trader is not intelligence. It is not analytical ability. It is not how well you can read a chart or identify a setup or manage a position size. It is the daily, quiet, unglamorous discipline of managing what happens inside you, of following your rules when every part of you wants to break them, of staying humble when the market is rewarding you, of cutting the loss when your ego is demanding you hold on. Jesse Livermore had everything required to be the greatest trader of all time. He had the instincts. He had the knowledge. He had the experience. He had the track record. He had everything. Except the one thing that mattered more than all of it combined. Do not make his mistake. Not because the market will punish you. Not because of what the numbers in your account will say. But because of what Jesse's note said. At the end of 63 years of the most remarkable trading life in history. A life spent fighting the wrong enemy. The market will give you opportunities. Your analysis will give you edge. But only you can build the psychological foundation that makes those things matter long term. That work does not begin when the market opens. It begins right now. In how honestly you look at your own patterns. In how clearly you see the triggers that have cost you before. In how committed you are to building something that does not just win for a while, but lasts. Jesse Livermore's story ended the way it did. Yours does not have to. The map is in your hands. What you do with it is entirely up to you.